I want to be upfront about something before we get into this. The conversation I'm about to describe happened the way a lot of important conversations happen these days, not in a boardroom, not in an interview, and definitely not in a press release. It happened in a Walmart parking lot. The store had already closed, employees were heading home, shopping carts were rattling across the pavement, and standing near the edge of the lot was a man who spent the last 11 years managing one of the highest volume Walmart locations in this region. I've talked to a lot of people over the years. Some exaggerate, some like to sound important. This wasn't one of those conversations. What struck me was how matter-of-fact he sounded. No drama, no panic, just someone who seemed genuinely frustrated watching the same thing happen over and over again to ordinary families. At one point, he shook his head and said, "People keep getting caught off guard because they think price increases start when they see them." Then he paused. And he said something that stayed with me long after the conversation ended. The customers think they're watching prices climb. They're not. They're watching the delay. The actual decision happened months ago. That sentence stopped me cold. Not because it sounded dramatic, because it sounded true. The kind of statement that instantly makes you rethink how the system actually works. And according to him, that's the part most shoppers never hear explained. The price tag you see on the shelf today isn't really today's price. It's the result of supplier negotiations, transportation contracts, inventory purchases, and distribution decisions that were finalized weeks or sometimes months earlier. The shelf tag is usually the last thing to move. It's the final signal, not the first one. And by the time most people notice it, the people paying attention have often already adjusted. Now, to be clear, this isn't about predicting shortages or creating fear. Nobody is saying grocery stores are about to run out of food. What we're talking about is something much more common and for many households much more expensive. A slow wave of price increases that's already working its way through the supply chain. Most shoppers won't recognize it until it reaches the checkout screen. He walked me through 7 specific foods, not rumors. Not internet speculation, actual categories already seeing cost pressure at the distribution level before a single shelf label has been changed. Some of these increases may seem small at first, but if you've been grocery shopping for a family lately, you already know how quickly small increases stop feeling small. And one of these items, the last one on the list, is something millions of American families buy every single week without giving it a second thought, until one day they look at the price and wonder when it got so expensive. Let's get into it. Item 7, cooking oils, vegetable, sunflower. I want to start here because this is the one that flies the most completely under the radar. When people think about which grocery items are about to get expensive, they think about meat, they think about eggs, they think about the items they see news headlines about. They do not think about the jug of vegetable oil sitting next to their stove. But here is the question my source asked me that I couldn't shake. What do you think every single packaged food, restaurant kitchen, and fast food chain in this country runs on? Not beef, not dairy, cooking oil. It is the hidden input inside almost everything. The fry oil in frozen French fries. The base in every bottled salad dressing. The fat in every cracker, every cookie, every pre-made meal in the frozen section. When cooking oil prices move, they don't just change the price of the oil bottle, they move the cost of everything that oil goes into, and that is a list that covers roughly 40% of what's in your cart. Here's the specific situation. Global sunflower oil supply, which is one of the 3 primary commercial cooking oils, is under direct pressure from ongoing conflict disruption in Ukraine, which, before 2022, was the world's largest single exporter of sunflower oil. That supply has not recovered, it is not on track to recover, and the alternative oils canola, soybean, palm have absorbed that demand shock and are now facing their own separate pressures from drought conditions in Canada, Indonesia, and Argentina simultaneously. Not one supply problem, 3 overlapping ones, hitting 3 substitute products at the same time. And here is what makes this category particularly invisible. The cost doesn't hit you as an oil price increase at first. It hits you inside other prices. The chip bag that quietly shrank 6 months ago. The frozen meal that now costs $1.29 more than it did last year. You're already paying the oil price increase. You just can't see it itemized on your receipt. The direct oil bottle, the one you buy for your own kitchen, is the last place the increase appears, and that price movement is now in the pipeline. Current price $4 to $7 per bottle depending on size and type. Projected price by June $8 to $12, possibly higher for specific varieties. Practical move, large format bottles, store in a cool dark cabinet away from the stove. Unopened oil holds quality for 18 to 24 months. 2 extra large bottles right now, at today's price, cost you roughly $10 to $14. Wait until June and the same purchase costs you $20 to $28. The math is not complicated. The window is just closing faster than most people realize. Which of these 7 concerns you most? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Item 6, canned A&D packaged soups, broths, A&D sauces. This one is about something that almost no one tracks and almost everyone buys. Not the premium brand, not the organic version, the regular can of chicken broth, the tomato soup, the pasta sauce in the glass jar, the items that are so ordinary, so automatic, that most people couldn't tell you the price without checking the receipt. That automatic purchase is exactly the problem, because when something is invisible to you, the price can move without triggering your awareness, and these prices have been moving. Here is the mechanism. Canned and packaged soups, broths, and sauces are manufactured products, which means their cost is not just the ingredients inside. It is the aluminum for the can, the glass for the jar, the tin plate for the lid, the paper label, the cardboard case it ships in, the diesel in the truck that moves it through 3 distribution points before it reaches the shelf, and the labor at every stage of that chain. Every one of those inputs has increased in cost over the past 18 months. Not one of them, all of them. Simultaneously, my source specifically mentioned this category because of something that happened in the distribution system about 6 weeks before our conversation. A major regional distributor one that supplies multiple major retail chains, including Walmart locations across several states, had sent a cost revision notice that was, in his words, the kind of number that makes store managers go quiet in a meeting. He didn't give me the exact number. He didn't need to. The point was the pattern. These notices had been arriving more frequently, covering more SKUs at higher percentages than anything he had seen in his 11 years in the role. The category, he said, was at the top of that list: canned goods and packaged shelf-stable products. But here's the part that most shoppers never catch. The can gets smaller before the price goes up. The tomato soup you bought 2 years ago was 14.5 ounces. The same brand, same label design, same shelf placement it is now 12.5 ounces. The price on the tag has barely moved. Maybe it went up 30 cents. But the product you're getting is 14% smaller than what you were getting before. The real price increase, measured in cost per ounce, already happened, gradually, quietly, without a single headline. And now the actual price, the number on the tag, is beginning to catch up to where the real cost already landed. Current price, $1.50 to $3.50 per unit, depending on brand and product. Projected price by June, $2.50 to $5.50. Shelf-stable imports hit harder. Practical move, identify the specific soups, broths, and sauces your household goes through every single week. Not aspirational variety, actual weekly rotation. Buy 8 weeks of those exact items right now. That is not stockpiling. That is buying Tuesday's purchase on Sunday before Tuesday's price applies. Item 5, fresh bread and bakery staples. There is a moment I want you to think about. Not a dramatic moment. A completely ordinary one. Standing at the bread aisle, grabbing the same loaf you always grab, not thinking about it, just reaching for it. That moment is about to change. Not because bread is suddenly going to become a luxury, but because the number on the tag is going to stop feeling automatic, and that shift, when a routine item becomes a decision, is the thing that actually tells you a supply chain has fundamentally moved. Here's what is happening to bread. Wheat is the base input, and global wheat supply has been under sustained pressure since 2022, when 2 of the world's major wheat-producing regions, Ukraine and parts of Russia, experienced simultaneous disruption. The global wheat market adjusted. Prices spiked. Then they pulled back somewhat. Most people saw the pullback and assumed the story was over. It was not over, it shifted, because while raw wheat prices moderated slightly, every other cost inside a loaf of bread continued to rise. The yeast, the packaging, the energy cost of the industrial ovens that run 24 hours a day in every commercial bakery, the refrigerated transport that gets the finished loaf to the distribution center and then to your store within a shelf life window that allows for no delays. A commercial baker isn't just buying wheat, they are buying wheat plus energy plus labor plus packaging plus transportation, and every single one of those line items is running hotter than it was 18 months ago. My source at Walmart noted specifically that the bakery category, both packaged bread and in-store fresh bakery items, had received updated pricing from suppliers that had not yet been reflected on shelf tags in his store as of our conversation. He described it this way: "We have the new pricing in the system. The tags just haven't been reprinted yet." He estimated a 2 to 4 week lag between a system price update and what the customer actually sees on the shelf. He was not speculating about whether prices were going up. He was telling me he could already see the new number in the inventory system. Current price, $3 to $5 per standard loaf. Projected price by June, $5.50 to $8 for standard varieties. Specialty and artisan loaves higher. Practical move, bread freezes exceptionally well. Slice before freezing. Pull individual slices as needed directly from the freezer they toast from frozen without any quality loss whatsoever. 3 to 4 extra loaves bought this week at today's price. Stored flat in your freezer. Barely takes up space. Completely eliminates exposure to the price movement that is already loaded in the system. Item 4, pork and processed meats here, is something that does not make the news cycle, but should. America's pork supply chain is running on a tighter margin than at any point in the last decade, not because of a single event, because of a slow accumulation of pressures that have been building quietly while the national conversation was focused elsewhere. Feed costs. That is the beginning of almost every meat price story right now, and pork is no exception. Corn and soybean meal, the primary feed inputs for commercial hog production, have been running elevated. When feed costs rise, producers face the same choice cattle ranchers faced during the beef crisis: absorb the loss or reduce the herd. Many pork producers over the past 18 months chose to reduce. The animals are gone. The pork they would have produced does not exist. But there is a second layer to the pork story that most people overlook entirely. Roughly 26% of all pork produced in the United States is exported, a significant portion of it to China, which remains the world's largest pork-consuming nation. When export dynamics shift, tariff increases, trade relationship changes, import restrictions, that export share can redirect back into the domestic market, which sounds like it should lower prices. Except it does not work that way cleanly, because the processing infrastructure, the cold chain, the distribution systems, they are not built to instantly absorb a volume redirection. The friction cost of that adjustment lands somewhere. It lands in price. At the same time, processed meats, bacon, deli ham. Breakfast sausage are facing their own separate pressure from processing and packaging cost increases that are running separate from the raw pork input cost. I have a neighbor who buys breakfast sausage every single week without exception. Has for 15 years, it's the one grocery item his kids ask for by name. He came over 2 weeks ago and mentioned, almost as an aside, that he had started buying the smaller item 3 dairy, cheese, milk, A&D yogurt I want to say something about this category that almost no one is saying. The dairy price conversation always focuses on milk. The gallon jug, the school lunch staple, and milk prices have moved, but milk is actually the least alarming part of the dairy story right now because it is the most visible and the most politically scrutinized. When milk prices spike dramatically, it is front page news. The political pressure is immediate. Cheese is where the real movement is happening, and it is happening in a way that is structurally different from anything the dairy sector has seen in recent memory. Here is the specific pressure point. The United States imports a significant and growing share of specialty and processed cheeses from Europe, particularly from Italy, France, and the Netherlands. Those trade relationships are now absorbing new tariff structures that have materially changed the landed cost of imported dairy at the port level. That cost is working its way through the distribution chain right now. It is not speculation about what might happen. The cheese sitting in a regional warehouse today was purchased at a higher cost than the cheese on your store shelf this morning. When that warehouse inventory depletes and the new stock arrives at retail, the new number comes with it. Simultaneously, on the domestic side, the same herd contraction pressure affecting beef is affecting dairy cattle. Fewer animals in the system means tighter fluid milk supply, which means processors have less raw material to work with, which means less output, which means less downward price pressure at the retail level. And underneath all of that, something quieter is happening in yogurt and other cultured dairy products. Packaging costs have increased enough that several mid-sized producers have quietly reduced cup sizes by 10 to 15% without changing the listed price. You were buying less yogurt at the same price you were paying for more yogurt 14 months ago. The price per ounce increase has already landed, you just may not have noticed it yet. My Walmart source mentioned the dairy cooler specifically when I asked him which category his store had received the most supplier cost revision notices for in the previous 60 days. He paused, then he said dairy and deli, both of them. Item 2, chicken. The irony of chicken is that it has spent 2 years being the affordable alternative. When beef prices climbed, the messaging was, switch to chicken. When seafood got expensive, the answer was, chicken. When pork moved, chicken held the line. It was the protein category that kept people's food budgets from falling apart, because chicken production scaled. Chicken supply was relatively stable, and chicken prices remained the one calm corner of the meat section. That calm is ending. Here is what has changed. Avian influenza, the same pathogen that hit egg production twice in 4 years, does not only affect laying hens. It affects broiler chickens, the birds raised for meat. And the outbreak patterns in 2024 reached into commercial broiler flocks in ways that the earlier rounds largely did not. The industry absorbed it better than the egg sector did, which is why the impact was less visible. But less visible is not the same as not happening. And here is the supply chain reality that is specifically pressing on chicken prices right now. Feed cost. The same elevated corn and soybean meal prices driving pork prices up are running directly through broiler production as well. A commercial chicken house runs on feed. When feed prices run 15 to 20% above historical norms, that cost does not disappear. It migrates into the price of the bird. On top of that, and this is the part my source specifically flagged, labor costs at poultry processing facilities have increased significantly. Processing is one of the most labor-intensive steps in the entire chicken supply chain, and it is also one of the categories that has seen the most turnover, the most wage pressure, and the highest operational costs per unit in recent history. He said this specifically about chicken. For a long time, everyone treated chicken like it was immune, like it was the safe bet. I've stopped believing that. I think about the families who have been leaning on chicken for the last 2 years specifically because everything else got too expensive. The people who made the rational, responsible adjustment and shifted their cooking toward chicken to keep their food budget manageable. For them, this price movement isn't just an inconvenience. It closes the last affordable door in the meat aisle. Item 1, rice, dried beans, and pasta. I saved this for last. Not because it is the most dramatic, for exactly the opposite reason. This is the category that generates almost no alarm, almost no social media discussion, almost no urgent warning content. And that gap between how important this category actually is and how little attention it gets is precisely what makes it the most important thing I can tell you today. Let me explain what I mean. Every other item on this list is something people will notice when the price moves. Chicken gets expensive and you feel it at dinner. Cheese climbs and you feel it when you're assembling a meal. The emotional feedback loop is relatively short. You buy it, you use it, you register the cost. Rice, pasta, and dried beans are different. They sit in a cabinet for weeks between uses. You grab a bag without looking at the price. You buy them so infrequently compared to perishables that your price memory for these items is essentially non-existent. You have no anchor. You do not know if a 5-pound bag of rice cost $4 or $6 last time you bought it, which means when the price shifts, your alarm system never fires. Here is what is happening at the supply level. Global rice markets are still adjusting from a period in which India, which has historically been the world's single largest rice exporter, implemented significant export restrictions. When a country at that scale moves to protect its domestic supply, the entire global market reprices. That repricing has been moving through the distribution chain and arriving at retail shelves in stages over the past 12 months. What you're seeing on the shelf today reflects that adjustment partially. The full impact has not landed yet. Pasta is under dual pressure, wheat inputs on one side, energy costs for the industrial drying process on the other. Pasta is made from durum wheat, which is a specific variety with a more limited global supply base than common wheat. Durum wheat prices have run persistently elevated. That cost is queued up behind the retail price that hasn't moved yet. And dried beans, lentils, black beans, chickpeas, kidney beans are sitting at the intersection of three separate pressures: drought in key growing regions in the American West and northern Mexico, rising transportation costs for domestic distribution, and increased demand from consumers who have already been substituting away from more expensive protein sources. My source said something about this category that I have not been able to stop thinking about since. He said, "The irony is that the items that could actually protect people's budgets the most are the ones people are buying the least of. They don't feel urgent. So nobody stocks up. And when the price moves, there's nothing in anyone's pantry." Think about what that actually means. The cheapest calories, the longest shelf life, the most nutritional density per dollar of anything in the store. These are the items that people ignore because they feel boring and secondary, but a 20-pound bag of rice is not secondary. It is the most rational, practical, cost-effective purchase you can make right now with the food budget you have. It does not expire. Your household will use it regardless. The price will be higher in June than it is today. There is no scenario in which stocking up on rice, dried pasta, and dried beans is not the correct financial decision. Current price: rice $1.80 to $3.50 per pound. Dried beans $2 to $4 per pound. Pasta $1.50 to $2.50 per pound. Projected by June, rice $3.50 to $6. Dried beans $4 to $7. Pasta $3 to $5. This is the excellent purchase that the smartest shoppers make without hesitation, and it is the one that will matter the most when summer arrives and the receipts are 40% longer than anyone expected. Here is what this all comes down to, and I want to be direct about this because I think the instinct to make this complicated is exactly the wrong instinct. What you heard from that Walmart manager, conveyed through me, is not a prediction. It is not a forecast. It is a description of decisions that have already been made at the supplier, distributor, and corporate buyer level decisions that have not yet appeared on shelf tags because shelf tags are the last thing to move. Every single item on this list is under pressure from causes that cannot be resolved in the next 4 to 8 weeks. These are not single event disruptions. They are structural shifts in global supply chains, input costs, trade relationships, and domestic production capacity. They do not reverse because the weather gets better in one season. They reverse when they reverse over years. A reasonable weekly budget above your normal grocery spend during this window is 60 to 100. Not dramatic, not extreme. The same money you were going to spend eventually. Positioned before the price moves rather than after it already has. By summer, a lot of people are going to stand at a self-checkout and feel a very specific sensation, the quiet certainty that something shifted and they missed the moment to act. The receipt will be longer, the cart will be smaller, the math won't make sense against what they remember paying. But here's what you understand right now that they won't. The prices people are going to be shocked by in June were already decided. In system updates, in distributor notices, in cost revision letters that went out to store managers before a single label had been changed. The shelf tag is the last thing to move. You are reading this before it moves. What is the first item you're adding to your cart this week? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely asking because the answers tell me what to cover next, and I read every single one.